Before I get started with this article, I have to give a huge shout out to Crave Fashions 41 on Instagram for sending me this story. And when I saw this, I said, I definitely have to speak about this because it's going to put something into perspective when it comes to not only the Asian American community, but just Asians in general who live in America. And it's always this narrative that they are extremely intelligent. Now, granted, I'm not saying that they're all dumb or that they're not all intelligent, but the narrative is being pushed that they are all, or it's a stereotype that they're all smart. You'll even hear from some Asians that say that that's nothing but a stereotype. And I believe this article that was sent to me is actually going to back that up. So the title of the article is Asian Americans in elite colleges would drop 21% if admissions was only based on tests. So if they eliminated standardized testing, like, or SATs and ACTs and scores like that, they said 21% of the Asian population in these elite schools, such as Harvard, like it says on this woman's sign, would drop. And that's not at just one school, but that's at a collective of all those elite schools like your Harvards, your Browns, your Yales, and all those schools, those Ivy League schools. And when you think about it, I don't think it's that many Ivy League schools. So 21% is a pretty big margin, especially also since the Asian American community is a relatively small community. So I'm going to go ahead and get into this article. Nearly a quarter of Asian Americans accepted to elite colleges would no longer qualify if their acceptances were based on tests alone, according to a new report from the Georgetown University Center on Education and Workforce. So basically what it's also saying is that their test scores are not that great compared to other groups of people. The study, which ran statistical simulations of admission decisions, found no strong evidence of discrimination against Asian Americans in 91 of the country's most selective colleges and universities. So they can't come back and say, oh, they didn't get in because they didn't meet a quota. Truth be told, some of them probably got in because of a quota. While Asian American enrollment in these institutions has remained stagnant over the past decade, the proportion of Asian American students who receive high test scores has also remained remarkably consistent. If standardized test scores were the only factor evaluated in admissions, 21% of Asian American students attending these institutions would be displaced, along with 39% of non-Asian American students. That's interesting. That's almost 60% of students in total. A test-only admissions system would also only increase Asian American enrollment by up to 2%, a marginal gain according to Georgetown University's CEW. The study comes as Asian Americans continue to be divided on the subject of affirmative action in colleges and universities. And I was getting ready to mention that, but they brought it up. Students for Fair Admissions, or SFFA, which claims that Asian American applicants are discriminated against during admissions, has sued several institutions in recent years, most notably Harvard University, which would explain this woman's sign right here. The case against Harvard has reached the Supreme Court, which postponed action in June and asked for the Biden administration to weigh in. Georgetown University CEW has claimed that since the number of seats at Harvard is relatively stable, Asian American and Pacific Islander applicants' chances of studying at Harvard would decrease more quickly than those of the general population if said applicants were disproportionately excluded from Harvard, as their total enrollment at four-year colleges doubled. That was a very interesting read. It was a short read. It kind of just got straight to the point. So all in all, it's saying that if they were to take out test scores or standardized test scores, a lot of people who are in the Asian American community wouldn't even be getting into these schools if they just had to rely on test scores for entry alone. So basically, it's also saying that their test scores aren't the greatest. I'm not going to sit and say that it's the worst, but they're not the greatest either. And it also goes on against that stereotype that all of them are extremely smart. Like I said, some Asians will even tell you that's a stereotype. Like I said, there's intelligence and ignorance in every ethnicity. But I'm glad they mentioned that part about the affirmative action, because that's the same complaint that white people love to use too. Remember that Weasley looking chick down in Texas, and hers was because of her test scores wasn't good, and she tried to blame it on affirmative action. You know what's so crazy? Black people are like the only group of people that would not blame something like this on affirmative action. Affirmative action was supposed to be for us. Go figure. But it seems that it works for everybody else, especially white women. The most. I'm like, if you can't get it on affirmative action, you're a white woman, then what's your use? But, it is what it is. But I thought that this was just something very interesting to bring up. Some of you probably were well aware of this, and some of you probably did not know. But, I felt like I had to mention it because, this is something mainstream media is not going to talk on. And if they do, it's going to be very brief.